write poetry, I think, in my heart and in my soul to create community. I have Africanos, I have Israelis, Afghanistanis, I have English, I have Dutch, I have Irish, I have Scottish, I have Indios. Everybody who reads my poetry, and if it touches their heart, I've created a community worldwide because of precisely what Eliud said. I don't have a community to go back to. Mine was taken off the face of the map. My parents were killed, my brother was murdered. I have nobody. And I think I write poetry so that I can create community worldwide, and it happens. With poetry, the only thing that poetry creates in its real, most essential sense is community. Much of what I write, the poems that is, are stones I litter the dusty roads with, so kids can pick them up readily and throw at tanks. Much of what I write are like bullets to reload the rifles of peoples fighting for their land and their way of life. Much of what I write is my way of revealing to me what CEOs want to conceal. My words are the black blindfolds I cut loose. And when I do, I find myself in basements and strange places I have never been. And outside I hear gunshots and children running from dictators.
Jimmy Santiago Baca was born January 2nd, 1952 in Santa Fe, New Mexico. His father was an alcoholic. The first time he ever set his foot in a jail, he was 5 years old. He was with his mother to go pick up his father, who was arrested for public drunkenness. And, of course, his mother left his father at the jail because she was fed up with it. Because of the tumultuous relationship between his parents at a very young age, Baca went to go stay with his grandmother and his grandfather. He stayed with his grandparents for a little while until things got too much for his grandparents, and they sent him off to an orphanage. While Baca was staying with his grandparents, he witnessed a lot of things. The main thing that he witnessed that really had an effect on him is he witnessed his father drunk, raping his mother, which really took a toll on him. It really stressed him out. And you'll see that as his life progresses. You'll see it later on in his life. Growing up for Jimmy was very difficult, essentially because he didn't have his parents to tell him right from wrong. He was in and out of gangs. He was always arrested, always getting into fights. And he notes in his book, A Place to Stand, he notes that he never felt accepted. He only felt accepted amongst those who were involved in the same activity he was, like gangs, drugs. First time he ever did drugs, he was with his brother. He said he and his brother would always go out and buy drugs and just get high, and then they'd always just wake up somewhere in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the street. He said this was a very rough and challenging time for him. It wasn't long before he was taken off the streets and taken back into the orphanage, where he was given the opportunity to go to school. While Jimmy was in school, he met a man. This man was the coach of the football team. He was also the principal of the school, who gave him a chance to play football. Jimmy accepted the chance reluctantly, as he really didn't want to play, because he didn't want anything to do with the kids at the school, because he felt he couldn't relate to them. On the first day of football tryouts, he stood out. He was a very good hitter, and the coach really appreciated him. He even took him to dinner with his family, invited him into his home. But Jimmy, he felt accepted, but he didn't feel that he belonged with these children, these kids who had both parents in nice homes and all their siblings living together under one roof. So Jimmy drops out of school shortly after being enrolled. When Baca was 17 years old, he, for the first time, fell in love with his then girlfriend, Teresa, but they didn't really have a good relationship. He realized that she was only using him because he was very good at fighting and he could always defend her, and it amused her friends. So they had a very rough relationship, and one time in the winter they got into an argument. She showed up at his trailer and she screamed at him and she screamed at him to hit her. She began to hit him and she wanted him to hit her back, but he wouldn't do it. So Jimmy ran off into the cold, into the hills, and he hid and waited for her to leave because he really didn't want to hit her. He wanted to make himself believe that he loved Teresa when he knew deep down that he really didn't love her the way that he wanted to make himself believe. At the very ripe age of 21, Jimmy Santiago Baca was sent to prison on drug charges. In his first 2 years in prison, he didn't do too much of anything. It was just like when he would be locked up earlier in juvenile detention centers and things such as that. It took 2 years before a man named Harold sent him to start writing him, because around the holidays he noticed that he was on a list for inmates who hadn't received any mail from any family or friends or anything, and because he had a very tumultuous relationship with his family. Harold began to teach Jimmy English, proper English, and how to write, as he didn't have these tools since he never really went to school. He didn't really have a background in school. So he began to, it was at this time where Harold would push Jimmy to begin to write and also push him into believing in God and strengthen in the faith that he never really had. Baca writes poetry from the heart, and there's always, whether you can decide to write poetry based on the good in your heart or evil in your heart, and this is a clip explaining how he decides what poem will be about what.
And you're expressing yourself from a very pure place too, because you create from aspect we were talking before the interview started. You either create beautiful poetry either from love or from hate, and has that been cathartic to you to be able to express yourself in that fashion?
Yeah, it's phenomenal. When you have the kind of upbringing that I had, where my parents were both murdered, my brother was killed in a gang, as a drug addict, and my other brother's in prison, my smaller brother, and I live on the streets from the age of 5, and I'm institutionalized all the way to 29. I've always been a ward of the state. So you don't have a relationship with a woman, you never sit at a table and eat. Normally you don't have a bedroom, you don't have any of the social etiquettes that normal people have. There's an awful lot of things that you have to learn. And I learned them through reading books, other people's cultures, European, Latin American, Scandinavian literature, Polynesian, Caribbean. And it's some people mock you and humiliate you, other people encourage you. And you take it all to your writing pad and you write about it. And then when I wrote about it, my work has been translated in 31 languages. I mean, I stopped over in Tokyo and called a friend.
This next and final clip is one of Baca reciting a poem, which he has entitled, "I am offering this poem."
I am offering this poem. I am offering this poem to you since I have nothing else to give. Keep it like a warm coat when winter comes to cover you, or like a pair of thick socks the cold cannot bite through. I love you. I have nothing else to give you, so it is a pot full of yellow corn to warm your belly in winter. It is a scarf for your head to wear over your hair, to tie up around your face. I love you. Keep it. Treasure this as you would if you were lost, needing direction in the wilderness life becomes when mature. And in the corner of your drawer, tucked away like a cabin or hogan, in the dense trees, come knocking and I will answer. I will give you directions. I will let you warm yourself by this fire, rest by this fire, make you feel safe. I love you. And it's all I have to give. And all anyone needs to live and to go on living inside when the world outside no longer cares if you live or die. Remember, I love you.